Did the UN actually say that they were going to explicitly legalize adults porking kids? You know, I'm doing that for YouTube. Not actually, but they might have opened the door to it in a very, very serious way. Let's talk about that as we watch our culture stray further every day. Howdy. Jonathan Viala here for Further Every Day, and I'm joined by a pretty full house. We've got Miss Nikki in the chair of theology via Zoom. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well. Glad to have you on, even if it is remote. Wonders of technology. And then we've got having a brain fart.
Starts with a J, ends with
starts
an
with a J. Ends with Justin. Justin. Because I'm tired because we have Miss Nikki on over Zoom, and so setting that up, I forgot Justin's name.
Justin.
How's it going, Justin?
You didn't just call him brain fart, right?
No. I'm having a brain fart. He's not brain fart. He's Justin. And this is what we do to all of our guests. How's it going, Justin? Sitting in the chair of philosophy.
Was going good till I was insulted. No.
Again. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, and then we got Mr. Steve. How's it going?
Man, I'm doing fantastic, John Arthur.
It's been a long day.
Yep, it has been, and prepared to be politically incorrect and
in the chair of culture and
culturally,
politics.
Not right.
Very good. Very good. As always, it is the expectation. So, real quick, is the whole issue of the UN legalizing pedophilia, is that a Republicans' pounce thing, or is that real? Well, I think it's really important to go to the source, right? So, Mr. Producer, if you can go ahead and pull up the Firefox capture, you're going to have to look at that down there. Rai, the producer guy, is actually running his first show here. So he's going to be setting that up. And we're going to go ahead and actually attempt to read this, and specifically the offending phraseology, if you will. You're actually going to find it in pages 21 and 22 of the document. And I'm going to see if I can pull this up. Consensual sex. Go ahead. Consensual sex, irrespective of the type of activity, the sex, gender orientation, gender identity, or gender expression of the person involved, or their marital status, may not be criminalized in any circumstances. Consensual same sex. By the way, if you have kids in the room, just saying, let them out because we're talking about that today. Anyway, as well as consensual sex, different sex sexual relations, or consensual sexual relations with or between trans, non-binary, or other gender diverse people, or outside of marriage with a premarital or extramarital, may therefore never be criminalized. With respect to the enforcement of criminal law, in any prescribed minimum age of consent to sex must be applied in a non-discriminatory manner. Enforcement may not be linked to the sex or gender participants or age of consent or to marriage. Moreover, sexual conduct, here's the issue, involving persons below the domestically prescribed minimum age of consent to sex may be consensual in fact, if not in law. In this context, the enforcement of criminal laws should reflect the rights and capacity of persons under 18 years of age to make decisions about engaging in consensual sexual conduct and their right to be heard in matters concerning them pursuant to their evolving capacities and progressive autonomy. Persons under 18 years of age should participate in decisions affecting them with due regard to their age, maturity, and best interests, with specific attention to non-discriminatory guarantees. Okay. Some of us in here have some legal background. Some of us have read a lot of contracts. We've done a lot of contracts. There's a lot of legalese in there. Just breaking it down, first blush, any thoughts?
Sounds to me that they're using legalese to explain away consensual sex with, as long as a young person says, hey,
I wanted to.
It's okay to do this, then it's okay. That's kind of like a, 6-year-old saying, I'm
okay with
trans, or, I'm okay with it. It's going to be fine. Okay. Hey, little kid, I'm going to give you 5 candy bars.
Let's do this. Let's get it on with a 5-year-old. Right. I mean, so some people are going to say that that's a mischaracterization, right? But the UN actually came back and had something. But before we move on to that, I want to get Miss Nikki's thoughts.
Well, here's the issue. First off, Why was the United Nations created to begin with? Was it to start poking around in creating laws for all the countries? Was it designed to prevent a world war? That's, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that what it was created for?
They have too much time on
So-
their hands.
Yes, and this is the problem, is that we've always had an age limit and considered minors under 18 because of the decision-making process that they had. It was a protection for minors because we have always deemed that they were young and able to make a decision based on knowledge and experience. And those are the best decisions that you make, is on knowledge and experience. So you're opening the door to saying that a minor can make this decision. And that's where the danger comes in, is because is a minor really capable and ready to make a decision that can't be changed? You can't go back. It has a lifelong effect to it.
And so I actually want to move over to Justin. Justin, you've got some experience in this. What is a professional opinion on the nature of children being able to make, and let's start with 14-year-olds and then we can work our way back. But what's your opinion on the ability of children to be able to make those decisions?
So I will say most children are not capable of it. Now I say most because how you determine, is a child able to make this decision is their maturity level, right? My, little brother, way more mature than I ever. He matured way quicker than I, right? So he was able to do things at 16 that my mom would have never let me do. And so it's based on the maturity of what they've gone through. Most people at 14 have not gone through enough, have not matured enough to make this decision, right? And so what we see is those who have made the decision have a lot of long-lasting effects that they were not prepared for. And that in and of itself is the root of the issue. It's not can you make an in-the-moment decision, but can you make that decision without those long-lasting effects? And at the age of 14 or younger, or even 16 or sometimes 18, depending on the person, right? They don't think about those long-term effects. That's why, if you're 16, you have to file for medical emancipation if you want to make your own decisions there. Yeah. Why are we sitting here going, hey, they can make choices about their body when it comes to sex, but we're not going to let them make a choice on if, they get vaccinated or if they, do get or don't get the surgery. Their parents get to override them in that one, but not this, right? So, and you have to do, I think the UN even calls out in there where it's based on, taking into consideration their age, maturity, and things like that. But you have to look at the kid, and every kid is different. But when you get 8, to 16 to 14, the kids are different, but they still have not had the certain life experiences, and that's not going to change. And I've seen this working with kids who, have gone through things. Mic up?
Just a little bit. Yeah, keep going.
I've seen this with kids who have gone through things and those effects that they didn't expect and the regret that comes with it. And we see it in society. We see all of these, rape claims of, well, no, I didn't actually want it. I felt forced into saying yes. I'm going to charge, and they get dropped and come out as, no, they 100% consented. They just regretted it later. And those are the kind of things that we're going to run into if we start letting the kids make the decisions.
And I mean, something that's really serious, I think people don't realize, we've already seen a precedent for this in the transgender issue. We see people coming out right now and saying, I was 16. You were supposed to protect me. You were supposed to counsel me and not tell me 2 appointments in that I had to chop off if you got kids in the room, 3, 2, 1, chop off my breasts and cut off part of my arm, create a fake phallus that will never work and install it on me. You were supposed to protect me from people who would do this for money. And now I think some of these girls, because it is more so girls than guys that now go through the transition process since the whole societal contagion factor of the trans issue has come out. And that's something that we see happening across the board, is they are coming for the kids, even if it's tacitly, even if they're just allowing a little bit more. They're allowing a little bit more. And I think that's why a lot of people have reacted, maybe overreacted. I don't think so, though, to them coming out with this March 8th so-called declaration that now kids do not have to be under the age of consent. And it's like we were talking on the show chat. We were talking, is this 16 and 18? Is this 14 and 25? Is this 8 and 45? Where's the cutoff?
So that's an interesting discussion. So I did a little research on the age of consent, right? Because my first thought was, what was the OG age of consent? Where did this come from? When did this start? Was the US the first people to be like, hey, children can't have sex? Because, that wasn't true. So the first age of consent was actually in 1275 in England. So age of consent and deciding that certain people aren't ready for sex and can't decide is not a new thing. This is not a modern thing. Back in 1275 in England, there was this rape law, right? And it made it a misdemeanor with median with age, but it made the age of consent 12 and younger. So since 1275 AD.
You mean 12 and older, right? You said 12 and younger.
12 and older. Yeah.
Keep going.
Sometimes you just start reading, right?
Yeah.
So age of consent has been around for that long. And over time, it has gotten older and older. So then the question comes into play, well, why did it get older? Why is it not still 12? And what it comes down to, and I'll, not bore you with all of the historical details, but basically it comes down to where the child's place in society was.
Yeah. Because
that age of consent was actually just for women.
Yeah. And by the way, the thing that I'm going to say something that's going to disgust some people. Okay. I don't have a problem with it being 12 or 14. What I have a problem with is them pushing it back before prepubescent teenagers. My great-grandparents were married at 12 and 14, right? My great-great-grandparents, they were married at that age. But then again, this was a different time. Children were in a different state. Things were different back then. And you did not have... Great-great-great-grandpa would not have allowed a 35-year-old man to marry the 12-year-old great-great-grandma. Does that make sense? Like, there was a different cultural standard where you understood that you did not let your daughter be taken advantage of.
100%. And I keep cutting you off.
No, go ahead. No,
I would say,
Jess.
that's completely right. And when you look at society throughout time, every time those ages got bumped up, you also saw the role of the child, or in the very early days, the role of the female changed. They got married later. They had more jobs, right? When you see it jump to 16 and the modern day ones, they actually call out the reason it changed was because they were now functioning in society at that age point.
Yep.
Right? So it's when kind of this consensus is once they're ready to be in society, they can make that call. Back then, being in society was at age 12. You got married at age 12. So they're like, well, you're in society, make the call.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's where I don't have a problem with it. If it is something, you have to remember that the adults have to take part in this. The parents, there has to be a responsible parent involved in that. And so it's like, I don't have a problem with kids who are in puberty or past puberty. The problem is that every inch that we give them on this is an inch closer to 2-year-olds. And I know that sounds gross, but that's what they're doing. So that's why I'm all for fighting for 18, and 21, whatever it takes to make sure we hold a line. Because you give them a single inch, you see they take a mile. You see the same thing in HF 1655 in Minnesota, I believe it is, where you have them attempt the Democrats, and again, it's not Republican or Democrat issue. Okay, what Republicans are advocating for the reduction of age or saying pedophilia should be added, minor attracted persons should be added to the list of sexual deviants that are allowed in our society. In Minnesota, HF 1655 would remove the exception for pedophilic proclivities from the list of and it would add it to the list of protected status sexualities.
We can talk about that later too.
I mean, that is nuts. And then the person who puts it out there is a non-binary or trans. I don't recollect. And this person says,
non-binary, if I'm not mistaken.
I've been so persecuted for this. You know, I wish I had a dry erase board. You know, the screw around and find out chart. I would say screw with kids, find out. You are at this point on the board. You're all the way out there. You're about to find out, buddy. You mess around with people's kids, you're about to find out. And that's the thing that scares me, because they're inching, it's creeping away bit by bit. We're eroding what's left of society on that.
You know, you have so many men out there that will not put up with that stuff. And what I mean by will not, they will take action. And I'm not talking about going to the cops. I'm talking about like
Going to the
taking action and, you know, forgetting about their liberties, forgetting about their freedom. They're willing to sacrifice their freedom and go spend the rest of their life in prison for what somebody did to their child. There are men just like that and are willing to do it. No problem.
Well,
you know, and you look at like incident that happened in Haiti so many years ago. The problem that went on, UN shows up. How many problems did they have in Haiti that came up, and the reports that were reported about the child sexual abuse that occurred in Haiti by UN people? It was just ridiculous.
And while we're on that, I do want to go ahead and capture that, and then I want to get your thoughts, Justin. But just so that you guys can see this, link in the description below, this is from The Independent. We're looking at potentially 60,000 potentially in a matter of 1 decade. That's what the estimate is from UN workers, people who were there to help. And by the way, they would wear UNICEF uniforms to protect or to pretend that they or get close enough to children. And you wonder why the UN is all of a sudden interested in saying that it could be consensual.
So, yeah. And I was actually in my studies. One thing that came up as I was kind of looking at, you know, the psychology behind a bunch of this was that one big thing they call out about sex abusers and pedophiles is the fact that they congregate together. They are attracted to each other in friendships, right? And so that's one of those things where, you know, you get one person who makes that step out in the field in Haiti, all of a sudden that draws the attention of some other person because they're some of the best profilers, right? They're going to be able to look and go, you like what I like.
Right.
Right. And they will draw others to then do it.
They can recognize each other. And the interesting thing when I was doing some research on this is that the UN workers, okay, just the workers, the lower class workers, those can only be prosecuted by their
own
country,
nation,
their own country. Now, only the officers of the UN can be prosecuted by the UN. So that means the UN itself, by all of the people, the workers that come in from other countries to do work, UN can't do anything to these people, not anything.
And it's a blanket. It's a blanket of protection. I want to get your thoughts to that, Miss Nikki, and then I want you to answer the question, your thoughts on what we covered so far, and then I want you to lead into the story about the Minnesota man, about how this produces vigilantism, lack of law.
Okay. Well, hold on here. I'm sorry. So the thing is, this is what bothers me when you're talking about consensual. And I know we talked about the UN. I think because of their record, they're the worst people in the world that should be setting a precedent here and making any kind of laws. The big thing that concerns me here is I know that it says consensual between minors, but this is the open door that you're talking about. If a person above the age, the age of accountability, let's say above 18, is engaging in sexual behavior with somebody as a minor, but they plead that the minor was consensual, it was consensual, I think that opens the door, because the argument could be, how can the young person consent with somebody under the 18 but cannot consent with somebody over 18? Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%.
So I will just throw out there to build on that real quick for you, Nikki. I actually looked up what is consent, right? And according to the Cornell Law School, right, consent means the person voluntarily and willingly agrees in response to another person's proposition. The person who consents must possess sufficient mental capacity. Consent also requires the absence of coercion, fraud, or error. And I promise you, in these situations, one of those is not working right.
Well, let me just add this. If you were to study sexual abuse among children, how many children said no? Because they're intimidated by the abuser. Mm-hmm. They're not going to say no. They're scared to death. Mm-hmm. It may be a close relative.
Sorry,
I lost you.
Sorry, that was my bad. I was talking to Mr. Producer here. What does the abuser always have? Or I should say 80% of the time, 80% of the time is someone that they know. It's a family member, correct?
Right.
If not more.
87%.
Thank you. 87% of the time is someone that they know. Miss Nikki, there we go. You just flipped around on us.
Well, my son's trying to call me.
I gotcha. So that suggests that this person is an uncle or an aunt or some sort of authority figure, right? That's most often what happens.
Yeah. Yep. Well, because you have to have, most of the time, kids instinctively want to say no. And we teach children, if it's a stranger, that's my purse, I don't know you, right? And you run. We teach them that with strangers. But once you get into, people how many times as a kid do you see, well, hug your grandma goodbye. I don't want to. No, go hug your grandma. We start to force that and say, well, them, this physical touch is okay, even if you don't want it.
And that's scary.
Yeah.
That is scary. So hold up on that. Hold up. There you go. Go ahead and click on that. There you go. Good. So sorry, we're doing live training with Rai here, and Miss Nikki had to just drop out just for a second. She'll be back in a little bit, guys. Don't worry. But we're going to keep going.
I mean, one thing you think about when they talk about consensual, how easy would it be for a UN worker that's in a country that's like, let's say a third world country that has people that hardly have access to a lot of food and water. This UN worker comes in, and like Justin says, a lot of these pedophiles will hang together. These folks, group of them are together. They go into a village. They got all this food and water. Hey, they see a group of them. Kids.
Well,
trade food and water for what? How easy would it be for them to get this and make it consensual by giving them
transactional?
Something?
It's transactional, not consensual is the problem, right?
Right.
I mean, that's corrosion.
And we've got that one part in there that we talked about earlier that we read, where there's that one transactional situation that is in there where,
Yeah.
you know,
And so I know we lost you for a second there. Glad to have you back, Miss Nikki. I wanted to kind of transition a little bit into your chair for a moment. When we start to rob people of justice, we start to see other things happen. And if you remember, we were talking about that one fellow in Minnesota. What kind of action do you elicit from the populace when there's no longer justice?
Well, you're going to anger a lot of people, especially a lot of parents who feel that they want to protect their children and take matters into their own hands like a vigilante. That never is a good idea. That's not good for society.
Well, it's actually scary, isn't it? And in fact, we actually have we have a very recent case study of this in Minnesota. There's actually a fellow who he bludgeoned to death a convicted pedophile who was stalking his little girl. I mean, think about that for a moment. And it's not that he just went out and did this. This man called the police. He called the police and he got a restraining order against this guy. And this order was temporarily in place. And they actually tracked the guy and they said, hey, you can't do that. And then eventually they dropped the charges against the guy and police protection went away. And this man is literally in a van driving up to the daycare and saying, and offering children candy. I mean, it's no more explicit than that. And so what does dad do? Dad goes to this man's house. He has a very frank conversation with this man. And somewhere between the conversation going south, dad grabs a shovel that's sitting there on the back porch. And before he's done, the guy's on the ground. And then he finishes it with a pair of moose antlers.
yeah.
The scariest of antlers.
You know what? As a parent,
That's all I got to say.
yeah.
Please go, Miss Nikki.
When you're a parent and he probably felt almost helpless. That's what can happen. Because your whole life is about protecting your kids. And you're going to do whatever you have to do to protect your kids. And he probably felt so threatened that something terrible was going to happen to his child.
Absolutely. And
I tell you right now, I don't know the whole circumstances, but you might be hard pressed to find a lot of people that would be angry with him.
well, in fact, I would actually say that I said this off air. I want to buy the guy a drink. I'm sorry. I don't see this as the man's fault. He has agency, but at the end of the day, what did you leave him with?
Well, yeah, and I had a buddy who did a prison ministry back in Seattle, and I was like, so how was it? Because I was in high school at the time. He was one of our high school leaders, and I was like, what was it like? And he said one of the hardest parts was the people who are in there that you look and go, you're guilty, but should you be in here?
Yeah.
He goes, one of the hardest ones was he met a guy and he goes, so what are you in here for? He goes, well, some guy raped my niece and so I killed him.
Yeah.
And you sit there and you go, okay, but the guy had gotten off on it. The guy got away with no charges, whatnot. So the uncle goes, okay, you're done. And you sit there and you go, he's not a bad guy, but he protected his family. He's not out there murdering people for the sake of murdering people. And that's the hardest part but technically they broke the law. But now we're legalizing
this activity.
This activity that is not okay. That, by the way, fun fact, since 1965, we have determined is an actual mental issue.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something that you need help if you want to clap the cheeks of a child. I don't know how to use, I don't know if it makes it better or worse than spelling it out. There's something wrong and you need help. If that's you today, go find someone to talk to who can help you. But also,
It's true. I mean, it is from the Diagnosis and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That is what is used in specifically the USA. It is referenced in other nations, but I took the one for the USA. It, since 1965, has been listed as a mental disorder, pedophilia. And that's, the urges or behaviors with prepubescent child 13 or younger for a period of at least 6 months. Right. So, but the issue we have is that's what this whole base is on is, well, it's a mental thing, right? There are studies, and unfortunately the studies show that if you are attracted to this age, there might be a genetic portion to it. There's definitely you were raised this way. There's a mental disorder of that's when this certain part of your brain stopped developing, right? Which is not good, and they need help. The argument, though, is being made, well, that's not their fault, so they shouldn't be held accountable for their actions. Well, that's great. But no, it's not great.
and that's just the thing. I can make an argument that there was familial violence. I come from an Italian family with the name Fiala. You guessed it, right? Czech Italian. I come from a family history where there were men who were abusive. I do not want you to give me an abuse pass. If a man touches a woman in anger in marriage, or touches a child in anger, and I'm not talking about being rough. I'm talking about like beating. That doesn't get excused, nor should it be. How much more so should something that does not heal? I'm sorry, you get beat by an abusive parent, that will heal. There might be some mental scarring, that's possible, some emotional scarring, that will happen. But you touch a child in this way, they will never function the way we do in this room. Mm-hmm. It is permanent. And no, there is no gene that says it. Just because I have a gene that maybe it's a gene, maybe it's just a culture, it's Italian culture. It doesn't matter. I better not do that to my wife or my kids.
Well, I'm gonna explain something here from personal experience. Okay, guys. Y'all know what the Ren Fest is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure everybody knows. This has been, God, man, I can't tell you guys how many years ago. My wife's youngest son, he's in his mid-30s now, at least. Okay. He was probably at the time maybe 6, and we had all of our kids. Okay, we've got 7 kids between the two of us. Okay, 5 boys, 2 girls. We were all at the Ren Fest, and we were all walking around having a good time and whatnot. And I turn around and I look, and here's my wife, and she is ripping this one guy up and down. I'm like, what in the world is going on? And all the kids are standing around me like freaking out. And she comes walking over to me, and I said, what is going on? She said, that guy right there. And he was dressed in some kind of like
outfit,
middle-aged garb or something like, I don't know, some weird looking stuff. And she said, that guy just propositioned our youngest son. I said, what do you mean? She said, he sexually propositioned our son and wanted to know if he wanted to go off over here to this place and blah, 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 blah. I said, do what? I said, y'all just stand right here. Now, I'm not going to say on air what transpired between he and I.
What we talked about after this.
Yeah, I want to hear it later.
But it was not pleasant.
I hope it involved a Brillo pad and a electric drill.
And you know, of course, here's, you know, all kinds of people around, but it was not pleasant, because I am, and this is a guy, and these are 5 of my stepchildren. I raised them just like my very own kids. To me, they were my children.
Yeah.
As far as I was concerned. And man, I'm going to tell you, there is nothing like having an experience like that, knowing that somebody is doing that sort of thing, or even has any idea that they even want to do something like that with your child. You want to talk about set a man or a father off on fire. So that guy from Minnesota, I can completely understand where he's coming from. Now, if there wouldn't have been people around, there ain't no telling what would have happened.
Yeah.
Because I tell you what, I had fire in my eyes. My wife had to come over and pull me away, because it was about to go bad.
Yeah. I mean, and this all loops back to the main thing of, why is the UN opening this door? Why is it bad that the UN is opening this door to potentially, you know, slip and slide into the bad place here? Is because we feel that anger for a reason. There's a reason we have that protective instinct over this topic and our kids when this happens, because we know it's bad for the children. We know that that's not the way we want our children raised. We know the lasting effects it's going to have on them, and they need to be protected. The UN itself calls out in one of its child protective something committees that all nations have the liability or the responsibility to protect their children from sexual abuse.
Yeah, well,
But define that. And that's where we're losing it, is we're losing the definition of abuse. And where do we draw the line if children can consent to mutilate their own genitals and their secondary sex characteristics?
you know,
How do we draw the line for them to be able to consent to sex, Mr.
you know,
Steve?
real men, biblically real men, and at the time I wasn't saved, okay, but real men have a natural proclivity to protect women and children. It's just natural, born in instinct. And I was raised that way, to be that way.
Yeah.
Naturally. I mean, I'm just that way. Period. That's just the way I am. And it doesn't matter if it's my children or somebody else's children, my wife or somebody else's wife or another woman. That's just my nature.
And Miss Nikki, I want to get you to chime in. I want you to chime in on this. So he's speaking about the paternal role, right? The paternal instinct here. Right now, you're the only lady on this panel at the moment. I'd like to get your thoughts on that as well, just from the perspective of motherhood and, frankly, just common decency. When we start to allow for that type of behavior, what is that going to do to our society? What does it do to the value of the human being?
Well, as a parent, as every parent, you want to raise your child in a safe environment so they can have a successful adult life. And you don't want them to have the burden of memories or of abuse that causes them mental anguish and maybe a very long-term suffering that goes with it. So, and you just have that natural instinct to protect. And any way that you think another adult or someone to harm your kid, it's almost like an animal instinct of, I've got to protect the child. I got to protect the child. I got to protect the child.
Agreed, Nikki.
I mean, I get that for
Agreed.
people who aren't even my kids, you know, especially if it's a young lady, I get that instinct. And I've been in situations where it's like,
Yeah.
nah, it's not even my kid. I'm going to beat your butt.
You know, John Arthur, yesterday, my daughter took her 2-year-old to the doctor, and there was a middle-aged woman in the doctor's office, and she wanted to play with my grandson. Well, that's fine. But then she wanted to hug, and then she wanted to touch and tickle him. And you know, my daughter was sitting right there. It was safe. But my daughter was so upset. She goes, Mom, I don't want anybody touching my son. She said, we just live in such a dangerous world. I don't want them touching my kid. They want to talk. That's fine. But don't ask him to give you a hug. Don't reach over and touch him. I just don't want that, because you read too much about children being harmed or abducted, and I don't want my kids getting comfortable with strangers.
Yeah, it's really sad that we live in that predicament. I've been asked to take care of people's kids, and I'm gonna tell you something. I've always been very uneasy about that, because you know I'll record the whole thing, and I've had, you know, it's funny because my dad comes from a different time, and I told Dad, I said, you know, I had this person's kid hopped up in my lap and they tried to cuddle up with me, and it's like, I feel bad, but I kind of actually put them off my lap. And it's like, I feel bad because developmentally there's a coldness to that. But I really do not want someone walking in with their child on my lap and them assuming the absolute worst. Only the closest family friends, their kids do that because they know me very, very, very well. And only the closest, what will that ever happen? And it's after many times like, nope, pick them up, put them off, pick them up, put them off. Fine. Right. But when it's someone's kid I don't know, I've always been so cautious of that, because it's like, it's a scary world out there. And I get it when parents are worried about strangers touching their kids.
I'm like, you know, give me 5, fist bump, you know, kids, you know, they're, you know, that's cool. You know, fist bump. Hey, that's cool. All right. You know, and, you know, they're, you know, kids. Hey, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fist bump. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
You almost have
and that's, you know, parents, they'll be, you know, okay, that's cool. You know, that's all right. You know.
Well, I mean, so here's the deal. I've been working in children's ministry since, you know, 7th grade. So, and as I got older and older, right, and I got, you know, higher up, director, teacher, coordinator, whatever it is, right, you start to look and go, okay, so here's this single, right, unmarried, I'm now 32-year-old guy who wants to work with children.
Yeah.
And it raises flags. And so I'm always making sure I am above reproach.
Well, it's also the fact that you say flags. I mean, that raises flags. But so I'm sorry, we're in Texas. I'm sorry. No, I've had the same experience. Like I was asked to help out at my home church in Houston, Texas. And there came a point where I kind of stopped helping because I'm not married yet. And people kind of get these weird looks. And it's like, I was literally asked to be here, but okay, I'll leave. Right.
You do, because, you know, you look, and that's the target where people, you know, most of the sex offenders we see are middle-aged men. Right. That's what gets on the news. Now, what's funny is in studies, there's actually no correlation between sexual abusers and the genders, right? There's slightly more males than female, but they also wonder if that's because females are just smarter and they don't get caught.
But also the dude thinks it's a score. Yeah. And that's a real thing. But the problem is that you are actually setting that dude up in a very different way than you are the girl. The girl's going to have emotional dependency problems for the rest of her life. She's going to have this image that's wrong, but so will the boy. So will the boy. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the girl does get it significantly worse. I'm not comparing them directly as equal, but I'm sorry. The 24-year-old female teacher that sleeps with a 14-year-old boy, that is a crime, and it should be.
Yes, I agree.
100%.
Because there's a power dynamic there also that people in the comment sections, you always read, good going, boy. Good job. It's like, no. You just ruined that young man's understanding of what sexuality is.
Yep.
and you just changed how he's going to treat his wife and his children in the future.
Yeah, because when you're pushed into it because of power, because of money, because when you get pushed into it, coerced into it, forced into it, or even manipulated into it, your first experiences are what solidify in you what this is.
Yes.
And when as a child, they are told, oh, it's okay because I love, well, this is how you show love is you hug grandma. This is how you show love. You sit on uncle's lap. This is how you show love. You let him, you let me touch you. Right. You know, that's then how they solidify. This is how I show love.
Yeah.
When you do that with sex, that solidifies this is what sex is. Now it's not what it's about in the Bible. The Bible lays out what sex and what marriage and what love is. And as a society, we're saying, nah, it's okay to change that a little as long as, you know, it's for the benefit of this person.
And I love where you just went with that. You just really started to hook us a little bit closer towards the end zone here. And I don't know if you meant to go that route, but the biggest problem, what is the biggest problem theologically with this? I want to pose this to Miss Nikki. Theologically, how does the issue of consent, being old enough, being of the age of responsibility to consent to sex, how does perverting that pervert the image of Christ in the church?
Well, when you lose your innocence to something like abuse, you lose your trust and you lose your faith in adults. And so when you are normally abusers abuse family members or people they know. So the child knows the person that's abusing them. It's probably a family member, a close friend to the family. And so that trust now is broken. And what you're asking is the child now to trust in Christ. Well, there's a crisis here because I have a crisis of belief because my innocence was taken from me in such a way that left me emotionally scarred. Make sense?
Absolutely. And so I actually want to carry that one step further than you did, because you did it very eloquently. Let's go one step further. The relationship of marriage is meant to demonstrate the salvation of Christ and the headship of Christ in between two people. You have these two people coming together under God, and there's an authority structure. There's a beauty of God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. There's our Father in heaven, there's the man, and there's the woman. When you pervert that image in any way, it is a direct attack on the human's understanding of their relationship to God.
Getting chills. Oh, so
and not being able to consent, not being old enough to know. How do you accept Christ if you are not old enough to know? How do you have this intimacy without being able to know? If it's stolen from you, that is cosmically wrong.
Faith in a lot of things that children, because they don't understand a certain age, you know.
Exactly.
Well, no, so I've seen it, right? I have led groups for kids who've gone through trauma, divorces, sexual harassment, sexual assault, right? And you see it. One of the lessons we used to teach is, where do I fit in my family? Right? Because what happens is when you take that child out of a traditional child role, they now don't know how they fit in the family. Well, when you sexually abuse a child, they see you doing something to them that only mommy and daddy do. They now don't know how they fit. When you're also that light unto the Lord, when people say, oh, God the Father, now they look and go, so where do I fit with God? Does he touch me too? Right? And I almost want to say it's a bit of a perverted way to think about it, but that's how the kids think about it.
It's exactly how they think.
And you have now pulled somebody out of God's family and told them you don't belong where God said you belonged. They don't know where they fit. It's the leading cause of kids running away from home. By the way, when you look at the psychology behind why kids run away from home, is because they don't know where they fit in the family. And it's the same with God. when you pervert a child like that, they don't know where they fit with God, and so they run from him.
And I would say it's the worst possible crime. I would say that, obviously murder is awful and terrible. And again, we're never going to be well with the algorithm here. Rape is evil and wrong, but rape against someone who is still developing there's something precious and special that is destroyed. And I'm sorry, that is what it is. An adult having a relationship with a prepubescent child, there is nothing like it. There is nothing like it. You change how that child will view reality and God forever. And that's why I do think it's the worst crime. That's why you go into prisons. And what's the one crime that the thugs, the worst of the worst in society, say, no, you're not one of us.
They will leave, rats alone. The saying, snitches get stitches, end up in ditches, right? They will leave them alone if there is a child molester. And they're going to go, that's your target. Even criminals are against this. And the UN wants to be like, well, I mean, it's okay sometimes.
It's possible if they consent, which is impossible. Matt Walsh said it very well. He said it is in all ways, in all shapes, in all forms impossible for a prepubescent child to consent because of the issue of I wish you would say this. The issue of informed consent. The issue of informed consent makes it impossible for a child to know what they are undertaking and what is being stolen from them. You want to get mad about the Indians and New York Island not knowing what they were losing? Whoops, you okay there?
I lost my phone, yeah. I dropped my phone.
You want to be mad about the Indians in New York Island not knowing what they were giving away for beads? How about a 8-year-old child not knowing how this is going to permanently change who they are, and they are being brought into a marriage because they don't like mom or dad, or because I'm going to give you a better life, or because, hey, you can eat ice cream on Sundays, and on Fridays and on Tuesdays and for breakfast.
The more you make something more acceptable in society, the easier it is to make it legal.
Yep. And that's why they're trying to go with
that.
That's why they're trying to go to minor attracted persons.
Exactly.
There's so much I want to talk about. We do not have enough time on this podcast.
Well, start to shoot something down. Go.
So there are studies on how young people should date, right? There are studies on, large age gaps. 10-year age gap. Are they successful? Are they not? Honestly, it depends on the people, not the age gap. But one thing they call that is society pressure on it makes those less likely to succeed, because people go 10-year age gap. Yeah. Ooh, cradle robber, and that makes it harder on the relationship. But there are absolutely zero studies done on relationships between someone under 18 and someone over 18. Except for, those that are like a year or two apart, right? There are no studies done on it because all of those studies are sexual abuse studies. There is not a single one to talk about how it was a successful relationship. It's always linked to sexual abuse, right? So I look at this, well, if they consent to it, right? So you're telling me a 17-year-old and a 30-year-old can consent together? When in all of history, we've always called that sexual abuse, right? That's when we start opening the door and compromising. We got to this point because of compromises. We're going to let people choose their identity. We're going to let people choose their gender. We're going to let people choose this because, they were born this way. Well, now we're saying, well, you're born attracted to prepubescence. So therefore, we're going to let you choose to. It's all these little compromises have led up to this, and we need to stop compromising. Somewhere the line needs to be drawn. And honestly, it was 50 years ago that line needed to be drawn.
The more you allow it to
to fester, the worse it becomes. And that's something that you've really got to start to realize. We have to hold the line now. It's like I said, Mary was probably 14 or 12 and Joseph was probably 28, right? Okay. There was a society in a time where women were, and men were allowed to get married earlier. What I have a problem with is not the age, it's the fact that we're racing to 2-year-olds. And if you don't believe me that that's a problem, go to any sex worker conference where you actually meet people who are on the ground. That is a real thing.
Yeah.
And I was at one where they were describing one case study where they had 2 children. One was 6 months and one was 8 months old. The 6-month-old did not make it. Mm-hmm. And again, you compare this. And the other one is permanently damaged. And again, I know this is really, really, really tough stuff to be talking about on YouTube. Sorry, I know we're not gonna get a lot of views here. Rumble, counting on you. Here's the thing. You're dealing with something that is so evil, you allow it an inch, they are going to go all the way to that point.
Well, and you look at the people who get convicted or the sexual assault on the 16-year-olds, the 17-year-olds. Most of the time, I don't have a number. I did read this on the study. It was on a primary source, so I didn't include it and I didn't keep it in my brain because I'm like, primary sources. John Arthur taught me that. Primary sources are GTFO.
Yes.
And so, but there was a number on the number of people who are sexual assault on the 18, 17 also had a large stash of child pornography from under 13. Right? So there's this line that even a lot of pedophiles won't cross. They go, I know this is morally wrong. I'm going to keep this part secret where I can get away with this part.
That's nuts. I didn't realize that you had that high of a that much of the population that commits 13, 14-year-old violent infractions have small children, early childhood porn.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, it's not all of them. And people argue, well, certain, pedophiles have a preferred age range. And they do for actions, but they are always experimenting, right? And learning. And it's this whole thing, and it's really gross to read about. It pains me to read about. But just the psychology of some of these people that have done these. I mean, I think my always example is Jared, the Subway guy.
Go ahead and remind us on that one.
Jared, the Subway guy. Do you remember who Jared, the Subway guy? He was big.
Do.
He was like 300 pounds, and he's like, now all I'm going to eat is Subway. And he shrank. Right. He was big. He started a foundation. He worked with members of this foundation to help children. He used that and was caught with a lot of child pictures. His age range, there was about a 10-year age range of these photos. So yes, he had a preferred age range. It was a 10-year age range, though. We're talking 6 to 16.
And I'm sorry, while 16 might be acceptable by some people's metric for marriage, 6 takes only one time for a 6-year-old for this person to be, I'm sorry, no better than a dog. I'm sorry. If you have evidence, if you have genetic evidence of via the rape kit, put them down. The recidivism rate is insane. And here's the thing. Do I hate pedophiles? Actually, no. What I'm saying is we really have bred a lot of sentiment and the ability for someone to tinker with the idea by letting them out in 2 years, 5 years, 18 months after they've destroyed a child. We let them back out, and one pedo gets to run through 20 kids in their lifetime.
Oh, way more.
Yeah.
Way more.
Yeah.
A standard pedophile or sexual assault, when they're caught, generally, because they never keep count.
Yeah.
But they have 30, 40, some have hundreds of victims before they are caught.
And you wonder why the LGBT group and population is skyrocketing. You wonder why? And there are no studies for this. So this is a hunch, not proven, okay? But I wonder, because a pre-social contagion, pre-rapid onset gender dysphoria, as was defined by Berkeley before that lady was kicked out for even doing the study, where she said, hey, look, this looks like a social contagion, especially among girls when they have body image issues and everything's going crazy. Pre that, in this last 20-teen something, 80 to 90% of everyone in the LGBT community was assaulted or molested pre-18. And that was the stat for a long time. I wonder what it is now, because you have no way of knowing.
The longer you accept it, the easier it is to become legal. Think about that. Just think about that.
And it gets worse. It gets worse every year. It gets worse every year.
Now, I do want to clarify, because here's the deal. There are urges of attractions that happen. We are not talking about the guy who walks down the street, sees, you're in the mall, you see someone with the booty shorts and you go, ooh, oh, you're like 14, right? We're not talking about that, because know it's wrong, and if you're someone who's having urges, who is going, oh, I'm not sure I can stop these urges, go get help. Honestly, Don't be afraid to go get help. You will go to a safe psychologist. Don't go to randomjoepsycho.com.
Yeah.
Okay? But you will get the help. You can get treatment. The issue, one of the reasons that they cite as to why treatment, why a lot of these people aren't helped, is because they won't speak up. They're scared if they speak up, they're going to be instantly barred from everything. All of a sudden, I spoke up, I've been having thoughts about a 13-year-old. Now I'm not allowed within 500 feet of a school. That's the fear.
And that's the flip side of it. And here's the thing. You have a situation where people are literally labeled for the rest of their life as sex offenders for taking a piddle in a public park. They're up against a tree and some Karen flips out, and now this person is a pedophile for just having done that. So we've reduced the charge, and we've increased, or rather we've decreased also the evidence needed to put you on that label. So instead of doing that, could we just make it a death penalty offense and have to have two or more witnesses, or the individual witness with a rape kit verifying it? Like that's really simple. That's really simple. If you have DNA evidence that has been transferred through contact, and you've got the person witnessing it, that's hard. I mean, that's really hard to fake, guys. You're worried about wrongful death penalty. I'm with you. That's hard to fake.
But then we come back to consent. And this is the issue of what the UN is doing, is they're saying if they consented, now all I have to prove is, no, I had consent.
Correct.
No, they did consent at the time because they nodded yes, because they didn't say no. I can come up with 1,000 reasons why this counts as consent, even though they only gave consent because they were coerced, because they were forced, because they felt they had no choice, which goes against what consent is.
Correct.
And that's the thing is, I would love to say, yeah, let's do that. Let's make sure we have this and this. And once we have that, then we can file, because I hate all these false charges. But at the same time, it's so easy for people to be scared into not speaking up about things because they think, well, I'm going to lose this consent thing. We need to stop that. And we're making it harder and harder the more we allow people to say, well, if you have consent, then it's okay.
And the Me Too movement hasn't done anyone any favors. It's done just the opposite. It has delegitimized real problems in the world of real women and real children who've been taken. And what we've done is we've delegitimized, we've destigmatized the issue. We've made it down to hookup culture is just a normal thing. And after hookup culture, of course, then it's non-heteronormative activity. Then it's child activity. Then it's animals. And by the way, I'm just telling you, this is historically. It's animals. Then it's dead people. And then it's cannibalism is ready to go. You don't believe me? Go look at what happened to the Sumerian, Mesopotamian nations before they fell. Go look at Greece. Go look at Rome. Go look at what they were accepting and inviting in. It wasn't Christianity that destroyed Rome. Sorry, Hobbes, you're wrong. It was
Sure,
the
it was a fire.
softness.
Pretty sure it was a fire.
No. I mean, Nero did set fire to it. But we're talking about the whole entire destruction of the Roman Empire. Hobbes said that it was was effectively Christians. No, it was decadence. It was
Exactly right.
immorality.
The same thing that happened to the Greek culture.
And every day that I see America stray further from God's light every day, you know what I see? I see God was right. There's a reason, Rai and I were having this conversation on the way about the death penalty. And, so Christ and the woman caught in adultery. There's a few questions about that, right? Like, where's the guy? And a lot of theologians they said, it almost sounds like the man was among those Pharisees who was married to that woman. And the reason he's bringing her out is and then what did Jesus say? He who did not cast the first, he who's never sinned, cast the first stone. That could have been, I don't know, this is extra biblical, okay? This is extra biblical. This is my hypothesis. Wouldn't it be interesting if Christ, looking into each of those men's hearts, says, I know what you've done, and I know what you're trying to do with this woman. First one of you who hasn't done this, you can throw a stone. Because, and here's why I say that. Hebrew law, you could have the person put to death, or you could put them away legally and say, you are no longer on the market and I am not touching you. So they weren't doing that. And it just makes me wonder.
Well, the thing is, Christ knew what every one of them did.
Correct.
I have
Correct.
I have a video to show you all after
But
this.
just to wrap that thought in, you were allowed to put an adulterer to death. Was that for adultery? I don't think so. I think it was for rampant sexuality, which the two are not necessarily the same. One is a sin, one is a lifestyle of sin. And I think God, when he said, you put someone such as this to death, you know what it leads to? It leads to pimps. It leads to prostitutes. You don't believe there weren't prostitutes in there? They took the form of, in the pimps, they were the priests of Asherah. And they had local temples. Think about this for a moment. That's how sexual immorality was meted out. It was always with the religion. It was always with the spirit. Satan was always tugging at marriage. In that case, it had a very direct link to God. The sacrament of marital intimacy was very much recognized back in that day as a act of worship. You and your spouse, that was worshiping God. You and the prostitute at Asherah's temple, that's a different type of worship. And so when God said, put one such as this to death, I don't think he was talking about your garden variety adultery, because he also gave that opportunity to put the person away, as Joseph would with Mary, if the angel hadn't intervened.
What about at Jericho, huh?
Exactly. God offers the opportunity for restoration, but the constant sexuality, it destroys the civilization, because it destroys the image of God in the church. And that's the scary thing. And now it's come to kids. Miss Nikki, you sound like you have thoughts.
Well, I do. The biblical definition of a marriage between one man and one woman, what people don't talk about, and it's because a lot of people don't ever get to this point, is the relationship that is built when one man commits to a woman and one woman commits to a man.
Amen.
And Charlie and I, on the 19th, will celebrate 39 years of marriage.
Oh, congratulations.
And there's a lot of people that never reach what Charlie and I have. Never. And never have the ability to say that I've only known one man or I've only known one woman. They're never going to know that. And that does play into having the relationship that God designed you to have. When we say the Bible says don't do this or Bible says don't do that, it's not to rob you of joy. It's to give you greater joy and greater happiness down the road. But we want the immediate satisfaction. And that's why the sexual sins keep getting bigger and bigger, and the desires keep getting more perverted, is because we've never fully understood what God wanted for a man and for a woman.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better.
So well put. So well put.
So well put.
So well put.
So well put.
So, would you like to add to that your final thoughts, Miss Nikki, from the chair of theology?
Well, I would just say that I feel very, very blessed. Charlie and I were extremely young when we got married, 18 and 19. None of my children got married at 18 and 19. It was a rough road to go when you're that young. But what we did have is we had the commitment and we had the Lord to guide us. And I believe that Charlie and I have been able to experience a lot of the joy and the happiness and the fulfillment that God desired for a man and a woman to have. Now, I would like to say this. If you're out there and you have been abused, there is hope for you, because we serve a God who is a healer. He's a hope giver. And yes, he can get you through all the ugliness that you might have suffered. He can do that for you. He's a God of healing.
Amen and amen.
Amen.
Justin.
Yeah, I mean, I just chair philosophy style here. You got to take a look and realize, why is this an issue? Why do we need to protect the kids? Right? Mm-hmm. The effects it has long term on them. Even, you know what? If you're not a Christian and listening to this, first off, surprised you stuck through. Second off, just look at the effects it has on them in society. Right? Look at what it does to those people in society, the depression it causes and all of that. And as a Christian, look at what it does to their relationship with God. Lots of times, we are the demonstration of God, because when you are older, when you're an adult, that's how they see God, a person in power. That's their only reference for God. And when you abuse that and you pervert that, or you allow it to be perverted, you're pulling people away from God, and that's not okay. So just take a minute, look back at why we even made a podcast of this. And if you can't see a reason as to why this should even be a podcast, why this is a discussion, I mean, you're the problem. Read a Bible.
Amen.
Coming from the chair of culture, the one thing I see is that we need to get away from this sexually perverted culture and get back to a more biblically godly oriented culture. And just, man, it's so important that we do that, so that we understand it more and read and pray. Prayer is so important. It took me so long to get there, but I'll tell you what, the thing that it just makes me so happy is that Jesus continued to knock on my door.
Amen.
Until I answered. And I am so happy about it. And the politicians, man, they need to jump off this bandwagon of this sexual perversion stuff and cut this out, because they ought to understand that that actually the populace doesn't want it, and get away from taking this right here.
Absolutely. So that leads well to the chair of politics. Just going to say something. I don't think a single one of the politicians, other than the extreme activists who are transitioning or non-binary, those aside, not a single Democrat actually believes that they want their 8-year-old or their 12-year-old to be in a relationship with a 45-year-old. You don't believe me? Just try it. You'll be in prison. Thank God. But here's why I bring that up. It's not hypocrisy. They don't believe what they are saying is true. They don't believe that it is just born this way. They don't believe love is love in that context. They're doing it because they think it gets them power. Remove that power, whether it's at the voting booth or whether it's at Starbucks and you're talking to people and someone says, well, they're just minor attracted persons. You know what? There comes a point where you are loving and you're kind. And then there comes a point where you say, thank God your parent didn't say that about you. You just let them know. You let them know. That's funny. Thank God you weren't taken when you were that age. Would you let your kid? You know what most people are going to say? Oh, sorry. You know, if someone says that, it's time to let them know that's laughable. Don't be mean. Don't be cruel. But you need to tell them it's not funny. It's not interesting, and it's not good. We're devaluing, chair of economics here. You're devaluing the human life. You are devaluing by taking away the most precious part of this person's life, and you're stealing the spring. You're stealing the spring of their life. And more importantly, you're stealing the image of God that they deserve to be able to understand who God is and how God loves them. That image will never be the same. You can re-glue together a shattered crystal vase. You can do it. It will never look the same. Make sure that we protect these kids' innocence. Protect these kids' innocence. If you like this podcast, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you for joining us. And hey, we've got 190,000 downloads on the podcast. Thank you all so much for that. We are grateful.
Thank you.
You're popular.
Rumble is slowly growing at like 70-something subscribers. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
YouTube, it's videos like this that I'm sure this is why
I'm not sure this one will be up for long on YouTube.
I'm sure this is why we get stuff deleted. You know, my old days from radio, they're deleting some of my old radio shows that I posted on YouTube.
Are they really?
Yeah. Because, you know, we can't have frank conversations anymore about saying things. But anyway.
Do you have the face for radio?
I do have the face for radio. Too bad I don't have the voice.
Let me see.
If you like this, go ahead and tell someone, share, all that good stuff. Thank you. We love you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. If you're still here, this was a tough topic.
He tricks me.
I know. I'm sorry.
Trickster.
I'm sorry that I've abused your innocence. I'm sorry that I've taken away. Okay. No. Okay. Favorite. We're doing something different today because this is a tough topic. Favorite color and why? Miss Nikki, favorite color and why?
Blue is my favorite color, and I think blue is very comforting.
Because it's comforting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Justin.
Oh, mine is way deeper than that.
Go.
I feel like I'm overthinking it. Mine is purple. First off, it is pleasing to my eye. I like a dark, rich purple. It's pleasing to my eye. And also, back in biblical days, it meant royalty.
Ooh.
My middle name is David.
I thought she was going to say it was royal or something.
Yeah, no, that would have been great though. I'm gonna change my middle name, y'all.
I thought you said purple.
You know, king. And so I've always connected with royalty, and purple is the color of royals, and so that's why purple is my favorite color. Right? I actually have a purple shirt on under here.
There you go, Steve.
I like green. It's always been my favorite color for as long as I can ever remember since I've been a little kid, and I've always been an outdoors person. Mm-hmm. I like being in the outdoors, always have, and I've just spent so much time outdoors, and that's probably attributes to one of the problems that caused my first marriage to fail, along with a number of other things. But
he loves the green.
That darn green kills marriages.
I've used to have regular clothes that were camouflage. I mean, I just wore them every day. I just liked it.
So the answer to the question for me is a lot like the answer to the question, how does Joe Biden make it through a press conference? Depends. But if we're talking, I'm sorry, if we're talking
that's about humor.
It is. It's always a winner, except at dinner. Anyway, I do like green. to wear. Okay, but cyan is my favorite color.
We said colors. Stop making
I thought you
things.
said science.
Cyan, CYAN. Okay, or baby blue.
Look at the man over here with his
cyan.
Crayola box.
Yeah.
With
Me with my
64
Crayola
pack.
box.
I
So
thought
the
it was
reason
like a
why,
gas or something.
the reason why I think it's a soothing color, like Basnicki said. That actually is. I wasn't going to say that, but that's true. It's also the color of the sky, guys. Where I grew up, it was the country, and a lot of my days were spent kicking cow turds underneath that cyan Texas sky with white clouds.
Not gonna lie, I
Plenty of them.
thought cyan was red. Not gonna lie to you.
No, it's so it's like
had a
aqua.
cyan
It's like
car.
aqua, but it's a little bit less green.
Bad memory.
It's less green than aqua.
I'm gonna Google it and then change my monitor settings so I can never really know what the color is.
There you go. That makes sense. With that said, tell us in the comment section down below what your favorite color is, because this was a hard one to talk about. Thank you so much. We love y'all. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.